Welcome to the conference talk show, and today we are playing Where in the World is Tom Singer? So where are you, Tom?
So right now I'm in Sacramento, California. I'm here. My nephew gets married in Napa next weekend, and my wife and I decided to take a little extended vacation. We flew in and spent the night. I'm in my friend's home office. We spent the night with one of my best friends from college and had a great dinner, maybe a little bit too much wine. And this morning, my wife and I are going to drive up to the far northern reaches of California to areas like kind of around Mount Shasta and some other places we've never been. So we're going to be off the grid starting in just a couple of minutes. We're going to be away from Wi-Fi and away from the computer. So I can't actually stay for the whole interview, but Eliz, my favorite part of the week is Monday mornings when we do the conference talk show. So I had to come in and launch the show with you.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you, as I often advise, are taking time and being away. So I applaud that. And I'm sorry that Clay and I aren't with you. But we have what I think is going to be one of our best conversations coming up. And I know you're going to be jealous that you don't get to stay.
I'm already jealous because what you're talking about is so important to everybody who puts on meetings, who works in the meetings industry. So this is going to be a great interview. I am going to watch the replay as soon as I can get Wi-Fi later on today.
Fantastic. So here's what's happening. Brady Antonio is joining us, and we both got to experience what it's like to have just a producer extraordinaire in terms of running a live event. And Brady, I love how he said that he's really fused together a world that he loves, Broadway theater, and a world that he has come to respect, which is the world of live events. So this is very cool. He creates corporate theater. He is amazing to work with. And we have all been at events where the that AV production team is very, very tense. There may be words that are exchanged. I was with Brady and the team from Video West for, I don't know, 6 weeks. I had never heard a raised voice. There was always such kindness expressed. And I think this is one of the secrets that we're going to talk about, is just being the kind of leader that inspires great production. So welcome to the conference talk show, Brady and Daria.
Welcome, Brady.
And say hi, Tom, and then get out.
Hey, Brady, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us on the conference talk show. But I can tell that Eliz wants to dive into what's going to be a great interview. So I'm going to go start my vacation. I'm going to head up to the far northern reaches of Northern California here right now. So have a great show. Eliz, I leave the keys in your hands.
All right. Thank you. I'll try not to drive it into the ditch. Thanks, Tom. All right. Let's join in because we talked about event production secrets on this one. And when we started, when we were talking at the beginning of our time together today, you said one of the most important things when you're working event professional and production team is to be internally aligned. What does that mean?
Well, of course, on the production end, we have to be internally aligned for execution of the show. On the client end, which is what I was referring to with you, is just aligned with what your goal is as far as the show goes, whether it comes to messaging, when you're going to have things by. I mean, I've had clients that it's clear they're not, and it holds up moving the ball forward. I mean, we can't get from A to B, B to C, down to Z, which is where we're on site getting things done, if we're having to figure all that out. I mean, clearly, the clients, like with working with you guys, you all, pardon me, you were internally aligned, and so we didn't ever have to worry about, even though some things changed and we had to move presenters around, but the overall goal always still stayed the same. So we were able to constantly all right, so we have our production timeline. We're going to go here, and then we're going to go there. But when there's internal misalignment with the
Mm-hmm.
client, um, then it really makes things complicated, or it can.
Well, yeah, I would imagine that that shows up often in things that are requested that are going to affect the budget. And I think that's one of the things so Brady is referring to the National Speakers Association Influence 2021 that we work together. And I am very excited we get to work together again for Influence 2022. And we're going to come back to the why it's important to get your production team chosen and working together early. But let's go back to this. We had some challenges for 2021. Not for nothing, we planned it about 16 different times because things kept shifting with the pandemic. We were also in Las Vegas working in a union shop that then made budget difficult. And one of the things that I really appreciated about working with you is either I would come to you or somebody on the client side would come to you and say, we want to do this. And you were always very kind, but you had to say no a lot because there was budgetary impact. And we, on the client side, we were very clear we needed to control that budget.
Right, and that is one thing that you see some producers who perhaps maybe they don't have as much experience, but I mean, everybody wants to be able to give the clients what they want, but ultimately, our job is to give you a good show, and at times. Especially when people are iterating on site and there's excitement, or if anything is last minute, which happens more often than it should, there are requests made that, again, one can come up to have a budgetary impact, which there's a certain section of the folks really care about. And then on the other side of it, there is the ability to execute, which comes down to how much rehearsal time do we have to be able to walk through this? Do we have time to actually make it happen properly? And when there's a really, really good crew, and when there's a really engaged client, we can make things happen very quickly. But yeah, no, it's got to be surgical, but it's not because we don't want to do it. It's because we're trying to protect the project.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you talked about was the importance of communication. I'm sure you have any number of stories about things that go wrong. I'm sure you do. But I think one of the problems that I've seen from my end is working with a client, and then you have 16 different people who are asking you for things or having input on things. And if it is unclear about who's the final say and who has the authority to approve something or disapprove something, got any stories about that you might want to share?
Oh man, that just makes my head spin because where do I start? But it's absolutely true. I mean, and we could sit here and you bring that up. There are all these things that you can't pick. Like, there's one thing that's this important. That's really important as well. Having knowing who in advance, but even on site, who is that person on the client side who is going to be the final decider. There has to be someone, and then there has to be someone on our side as well.
Right.
And we work together to make that happen. Yeah, it's too many chiefs too many chefs in the kitchen.
Right.
Doesn't work out too well. So
you touched a while back on the rehearsal piece. And one of the challenges of Influence 2021 is that due to budgetary reasons, as you noted, we lost an entire day of rehearsal. And I think one
Yes.
of the things that people don't necessarily understand is the rehearsal of the production team that needs to happen. Even without any of the speakers or your board president that's going to do this, I'm assuming you like to have all of that beforehand. Tell us a little bit about what you need to have in place in order to be ready even to receive all the rest of it.
I mean, receive all the rest, as in
Like
just
speakers and all of the things, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So many times these days with budgetary constraints, and that's always been the case, but it seems to be even more so lately. Is that one of what gets chopped is prep time for the crew. I mean, we come in and we build these shows out, and depending on the scale of the show, sometimes it can happen in one day. Sometimes it takes a week to build these things out. Normally, in larger shows with bigger budgets, they set that time aside for the crew to. Once everything is set up, we need to test all the signals, test all the sources, make sure this is working, that's working, make sure all the audio is working, all the mics are working. Um, all the videos play, that we have all the content, that we put the content in the places that they're going to exist. And then after that, we need to internally tech. So we
Hmm.
want to rehearse prior to seeing you so that we can be ready for you so you're not waiting on us, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
and that time is golden. And yes, we that show, if I had hair, I would have lost it. Or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I don't have much.
Well,
But
it
that
was,
was a full sprint. That was a full sprint for those days for
yes,
sure.
it was. Well, and it was, to be fair, we had about 6 weeks in total to put that show together.
Hmm.
And
And you did a great
that's
job.
not advisable. It's not advisable. But that is why having a producer who has that theater background, who is deeply steeped in live event production, who can step in and say, okay, we need to go. Here's what we're going to do. And you really drove that whole event to the finish. In and was a nice guy all the way along, because I know there were late nights and there were things that from the client end we didn't take into account that then we had to sort of shove into the show flow that was already compacted because we needed to stay within union timelines.
Right.
Just this is why it's so important to get your event production team on board early. So this time around, we're gonna, 6 months, 9 months. That is a luxury of time where we can say, here's the skeleton of how I think our show is going to look. What do we need to put in from your point of view? Where do the breaks need to be? Because it's not nice to make your event production team, sit there for a long period of time and not have the chance to stand up, relieve themselves, have a bite to eat, get a cup of coffee if it's on all the time.
Yeah. All that basic stuff. I mean, even if it's, that the crew is having to come in early in the morning and
Mm-hmm.
there's no food, or the crew, taking into account the presenter's time, they get to come up and then they get to leave, but the crew
Mm-hmm.
is there for all the time. And some of that's production 101, but very often it gets lost in the attempt to pack a lot into a short amount of time.
Right.
And it's our job to just make sure that people are taken care of, because ultimately, I mean, it's the people that make the show work. And not
Absolutely.
only do people have basic needs that have to be fulfilled, but people also want to know that they're taken care of as well and that they're thought of,
Right.
because that goes a heck of a long way towards creating a culture where people will just go that extra mile for you. It's essential. And I really try, and the golden rule, I try and treat other people how I'd want to be treated. And I'm very detail oriented, but I really try and take into consideration presenters' needs, presenters' needs holistically, whether it's their personal time on site, to what their needs are professionally, presenter wise, and then also the
Hmm.
crew. And yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot going on. And on the show there in Vegas, you're right, losing that day was a real challenge. But fortunately, and I'll wrap this little point up, the quality of the crew that you have, you get what you pay for, and it's nice
Hmm.
to be able to pick and choose who you have in key positions. Video, audio, stage manager. It's worth its weight, and I know that people have budgets they have to stay within, but having a good crew is a big, big deal.
I couldn't agree with that anymore. It One of the things that I think is really important, especially if you have an event that repeats annually. Like it is the same event. Clearly, you're going to have different presenters and you might have a different sort of flavor to it. But when you have a production team that understands your organization, understands the the pressures from the client side, like there's pressure to provide our members with an experience that they're going to find valuable. If your
Yes.
event production team understands what that is, what are our members going to find valuable, that's just another eye on the prize, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and I'd like to know a little bit about how do you create that environment on the AV production team that allows for that, because your team went well above and beyond and were nice about it. There were, as I said, no raised voices, no grumbling. People were just so wonderful to work with. And I put that on you, that you have created that environment where people are feeling like they can do that. Where do you start building that environment?
Thank you. And by the way, the kind words are it's I humbled by that introduction, and still I appreciate all that. When it comes to the crew, the first thing I try to do is keep them informed
Mm-hmm.
in advance of the show, depending on the involvement, depending on what's being produced. There's different levels of involvement, but at a minimum, I let the crew know what's going on. Crews sitting in the dark, and obviously, literally at times in the back,
Right?
but figuratively being in the dark and not knowing what's coming up happens more often than it should. And I try and make sure everybody knows what's going on, what the plan is, what we know, what we don't know, what we're expecting, when we're expecting people. And they also know that I am not going to, that, the whole going back to knowing how to say no thing
Mm.
is part of that tapestry, but that I am here to make sure that they are able to do their jobs. And growing up in this business, I've had my hands, and before I figured out where I really wanted to land, I kind of migrated through all the different positions. So I have a decent understanding of what it takes in those areas to accomplish those things. So I I respect their time as well,
Mm-hmm.
and I respect. I demonstrate that in. And I also don't ask anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, um,
Perfect. Yeah.
from a time stance. And so, as we're moving forward together as a team, they feel trusted, and then they trust.
Hmm.
And in these environments, it's often, it's a lot of pressure there. So, and the folks that we had on that show were just rock stars.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Rob Nemo, Mike Winning, Andrew Carruthers, all the team put together by Mike Pico. Everybody knew what they were doing and was really good at their job. And yeah, those guys went above and beyond the call of duty, and it's yeah, just great to work with them.
Well, and
Did I
I
answer
had,
your question?
you did, and I have plans to get Mike on the show because that's another angle that I think we should really explore. But for the just amazing experience that you provided, I wish everybody had the chance to be backstage and just experience what it's like to have such a professionally run show, because that's not always the experience. And for that reason, Tom in absentia, are awarding you with the Conference Hero Award. It is one of the things that we have chosen to do, really celebrating people who have done things that are really well above the call of duty, and done it in a way that is just wonderfully human. And so we thank you for that. You will be receiving the coveted Conference Hero. Whoop, too much glare. Too much glare. There we go. Conference Hero mug. But thank you so much for what you've done for the events industry, and just for being like, I wish when I was in theater productions, I had had a director like you. Uh, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so generous, Liz. I'm kind of, I, I don't have a tough time finding something to say, but I'm humbled. I appreciate all this. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you, and I can't wait to be on site with you in Nashville in July and get to do it again. And it is just a joy to work with you. And before we wrap up, I would love to know, what has your experience in the world of theater allowed you to bring into the live event industry world? What's that
Ooh.
magic thing that you get to bring along with you?
It sounds silly, but the first thing that popped into my head was love.
Hmm.
Um, I love that space. I love that atmosphere. And when I really dive into it in my brain, I could even smell the paint from the scene shop.
Hmm.
Um, and I care about the quality of a good production, and it
Mm-hmm.
just transfers over for me. Um, that sounds a little mushy, but I mean,
I
honestly,
I think that's
I just
right. Yeah. It is. It is felt that. I just remember you sitting on the stage with your computer talking to presenters, and it was a theatrical environment. I could tell that you really cared that this was going to happen in a way that made everybody in the room have an experience together that was special. And you don't always get that. And I think that is the reason that people should hire you to be their producer, their event producer, their creative director. And if somebody's watching this and they're thinking to themselves, well, heck yeah, I do want him to be part of that, where would they find you?
well, I don't currently have a website. I used to, but my email address is brady@theshortbaldguy.com. Um, and I'm on LinkedIn, Brady
Yep.
Antonio, the short bald guy as well. Yeah, I had a business name years ago that nobody cared about, and my college email address was shortbaldguy@earthlink.net. And eventually, I would end up sending out an email from that, and clients always gravitated to it, and they never forgot it. And so finally, I'm just like, why swim upstream? And so I just changed my company name to that.
Love it.
So
Love it.
I have some partners that I've worked with for a long, long time. Video West, I've been partnered with for years.
Mm-hmm.
But I am I am a freelance guy with my own little company here. So Liz,
I
it's a pleasure to work with you too, and I'm really looking forward to the next round.
Me too. Me too. I think it's going to be a lot of fun this year. And so find Brady on LinkedIn. Absolutely do that. And if you want to find out more about the Conference Talk Show, you can find us every Monday at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time at conferencetalkshow.live on Facebook. And you can catch all the episodes on conferencetalkshow.watch on YouTube. Up above Brady, you can find conferencetalkshow.com. All of our episodes are there, and information about how to work with Tom or me or Tom and me. And then if you know somebody who is amazing, like Brady, and want to nominate them for a Conference Hero Award, go to conferenceheroaward.com. You will also find all of the Conference Heroes on that page. Brady, thank you so much for being with us. I am so jazzed to be working with you again, and can't wait for July. Until next week, thanks everybody for joining us. See you soon.
Thank you.